Well, today is kind of a special video because we're going to start doing a little bit more interaction with our viewers, followers, and really take questions you have out there, which is what generates all these videos in the first place. So we have some really good topics today, and we have our WHS private Facebook page, and what that's for are clients and web class purchasers. So we have a collection of people on there. They're really intense in their habitat management. It's a place where they can share in private without their neighbors knowing what they're doing or anything else. And we can look at this, these comments and questions, and basically a lot of discussion between previous clients and web class purchasers, and a really good discussion with those groups. And one thing, I always try to mention some personal things that we're going through. A lot of you know that our house is being worked on, and it's been being worked on since July. The contractor's doing a great job. We're starting to wrap up, but this is our room. This is going to be our hunting room right here. We're actually going to have a desk, a big whiteboard, and we'll make this into where we can shoot YouTube videos and our web classes. But it's not complete yet. So we don't have heat running in here, and it's cold. We'll just put it that way. So blessed to have some heated vests. I'm not just wearing it for the fun of it. Pretty cool. You can see it's on right down here. I'm not ashamed to say that I enjoy a heated vest and wearing it and keep us warm when we're shooting videos. So Volt heat gird, some good stuff. Dylan's even wearing one. So
it is cold.
Dylan's wearing his boots. He's actually in here. I have slippers on, but either way. But what we're going to do is take some questions from you guys, and we're going to talk about them, discuss them, and I think it'll help you, and we're going to do that going forward. And what we're going to do is we'll take it to another level. Right now we're just taking questions, comments from YouTube and the private Facebook page, and we're going to discuss a couple of those. But in the near future, very near future, Dylan and I schedule out when we're filming, often weeks in advance, sometimes over a month in advance, to what days we're going to get together and film. And we will let you know that in upcoming videos or social media posts. And when we do that, it'll give you the opportunity to ask a question. We just ask that the time frame that we're going to be filming in, let's say that was from 1 to 4 in the afternoon on a Tuesday, whatever date that is in March or February. Then we just ask you to be available, and we'll try to let you know a closer time when it gets down to that time and that day. But we would like you to appear on FaceTime, Zoom, whatever we do. We'll have a desk here and have a discussion with Dylan and I. We'll pick random comments, random people that want this to take place, and then we'll send you a WHS hat for participating with us, and we'll have a little conversation where we can actually gather some information and talk back and forth as opposed to just reading a question. We have a few questions and comments today though, and I think this will help you a lot. We picked out some really good ones, we think. And so Dylan, if you want to fire away.
So this is from the WHS private Facebook group from Edwin.
Okay.
It says, I need some advice. I'm in Oklahoma and was gearing up to follow Jeff Sturgis's plan for no-till plots this year on a property we share with a couple other families. One of the other hunters wants us to till the land so that we don't have to spray for weeds. I was under the impression that tilling kills current weeds, but also causes weed seeds to activate. We have a tractor and can use a tiller if we want. What would you do? Well,
I can start by saying, and I know this is pretty definitive, but if I had private land and I was putting in food plots, I would not own the land, buy the land, lease the land, use the land, and plant food plots if I couldn't use chemicals. And there's people out there that say, well, I'm not using chemicals, and they're continually tilling. I know someone who's a friend of mine, his father will till the land, till the food plots 3 to 4 times. It's in hill country. There's a lot of erosion that takes place. You don't build that top layer of soil, and it's repeated diskings over and over again, and it does set the weeds back. It breaks apart the weeds. By the time you do this 3 or 4 times during the season or during the growing season, you can set back your weeds significantly to where you can actually have a decent plot going into the fall that's weed free. If you're planting food plots and you have too many weeds, I've seen 10-acre food plot fields that really have a ½ acre to 1 acre of food plot because they didn't use chemicals. And a lot of times if you have 10 acres, to repeatedly disc that over and over again, for one, you're damaging the soil, you're damaging the top layer of the soil, you are setting back weeds. But what you're also doing is you're using typically big equipment to do so and expending fuel, a lot of your time, a lot of resources to disc repeatedly. There's a balance. I like to, for example, the buckwheat no-till method. We can use chemicals in the beginning of the season. We can use chemicals at the end. We can use buckwheat as a weed smothering crop to help aid in really setting back weeds during the summertime. I think in the end, if you're you're better off using 1 to 2 acres with chemicals and doing it right and limiting weeds than you are continually disking over and over again, setting back not only your weeds but your soil health. And that's why no-till is an exceptional option for you. And so you're looking at that balance of size of food plot, getting the most out of your food plots and your effort. And I can understand people's negativity towards chemicals, but at the same time, there's a balance of using too much equipment, too much time, too much fuel. So what I do in that situation is I need to use those chemicals to get good food plots in. That's going to help me build a better herd. And there's even talk out there that weeds are good in food plots, and don't listen to any of that garbage. During the summertime, weedy food plots are great. Deer like that variety. Instead of just clover, alfalfa, there's some weeds mixed in there. Could be young ragweed, goldenrod, whatever it is. And deer might like that. Might even be young briars coming in because you're not taking care of it. All that is gone during hunting season. So there's great studies out there that show deer prefer variety and weeds during the summertime. But great deer herds, and great hunts are not built during the summertime. They're built during the fall. So if your weeds are all dead and brown and on the ground and deer aren't eating them, then a weedy food plot is really, really bad. It goes back to that efficiency of your work, your resources. So think about that balance of using too much of equipment, too much time, and big equipment and fuel and continued disking, erosion problems. There's a better way to plant food plots than continually working over the earth. Dylan, what's the next? I think we have another good question.
So this is also from the private Facebook group. This is from John, who asks, does anyone have experience with newly clear-cut properties? How long will it be until it's worth hunting? Establishing food plots would be very difficult with all the stumps, but I guess you could work around them.
You know what's great about a new clear-cut property when it relates to food plots is that you only have the stumps. So you're not pushing over logs and needing to get rid of logs. And so removing stumps is pretty easy, but at the same time you can still plant around the stumps, especially in a no-till operation. So you're spraying to decrease vegetation and weed concerns. And you can spray around those stumps. You can do it with a hand sprayer. I've seen some beautiful 2-acre fields, middle of the woods, where someone had taken all the lumber off and all the timber, logs, tops with the chainsaw and left those stumps. Those stumps are cut down to a foot high. And then I'm seeing a picture a few months later where they planted brassica and you can't even see the stumps. It just looks like a beautiful brassica field. So you can plant around the stumps. The stumps take out space. They are hard to work around if you're using a cultipacker, but a lot of times you can squeeze around those stumps if they're big hardwood stands. But always keep in mind that you can still get it done. It's actually easier for a dozer operator to come in there and clear that sometimes. If they're big stumps, it's almost better for them to tip them over and they have that leverage. But at the same time, really good time to then get someone in there to clear those food plots. And a lot of times that can be taken place by your logger. Now, second part of that question, how long will it take for that to be good? If it's popple, aspen stands, that regeneration should be 3 to 4 foot high after that first summer, maybe even 5 foot high. But by the time you get into year 3 or 4, you can't see through it more than 20, 30 yards. It is so thick. So deer utilize it right away. In any clear cut, they use right away. Clear cut on public land, for example, is like a cornfield in private land. Deer focus on it every single day. It's very important to them. In the case of hardwood cuttings, when you have to rely on stump sprouting and random sprouting because the sunlight's hitting the forest floor, then at that time, it does take 3 to 5 years in hardwood cuttings before they start to offer enough cover in that location to actually hold deer. But they'll actually attract deer feeding on those open hardwoods. And it really depends on if you're north and south. If you're up north, let's say central Wisconsin or further north, central Minnesota, upstate New York, it'll take longer for those hardwoods to offer cover, and they'll offer food the first growing season because you have all that regeneration. But cover doesn't form for a while. But if you're in southern Illinois, southern Indiana, Ohio, Kentucky, West Virginia, you'll notice that those clear cuts regenerate so thickly in 3 to 5 years that they actually push deer outside of those areas because the deer simply can't transfer through them or walk through them because they are that thick. I've hunted clear cuts like that down in the Shawnee State Forest, for example, Ohio, where they're so thick it's hard for those deer to walk through them, and they'll avoid those areas. So you can have really good years in those first few years where they're attracting a lot of deer and regeneration, and then that cover fills in 3 to 8 years, 10 years, depending on if you're in a more southerly location or central Midwest, south half of the country versus the north half, and especially those northern settings. So clear cuts can be a great start for habitat improvements. I encourage you to find a good plan, come up with a good plan so that your clear cutting areas where you want to diversify, plant conifers, for example, in bedding areas or overall improvement of the habitat, so you're not just holding on to those hardwoods. And then also utilize those clear cuts in areas where you need to hold deer, where there's bedding areas, and then use old growth forest where you're not cutting. And then you might have areas that are select cut on your property, depending on your timber type. So that you actually have 3 different cuttings taking place on your land instead of just one big clear cut or one big select cut forest. That's traditional forestry. This is whitetail management, habitat management, and smart whitetail habitat management, not traditional forestry. That's boards per foot, completely different focus. When you're focused on wildlife and whitetails, you need to have those various stages of cuttings where you might have old growth where you're accessing through, blowing your scent into. You might have select cut, which is your general timber stand improvement, wildlife stand improvement, and then you might have clear cuts where you're adding conifers into in specific bedding locations as you're putting the entire plan together. Clear cuts can be a great start, and don't ever forget the use of the loggers and their equipment and how you can get food plots installed quickly, stump free, so that you can actually create a plan and enjoy your property this season. This isn't something that should take 5 years if it's done correctly. This is something that should take 1 to 2 years if done correctly. Oh, one thing to add in that, I really wanted to add, if you're creating food plots and you have a lot of debris to clear, always remember, here's your food plot space, whatever it is. When you're clearing these areas, I want to see you take all the stumps and debris from portions of the property, and you'll stick those off of the property 50 feet, or off the food plot 50 feet, 30 feet, whatever it might be. And you're clearing these areas. So you end up with pockets around your food plots. They're not rim-rowing your property. Some areas, deer will put up with that. They don't desire it anywhere. But in northern Ohio, where there's not a lot of cover, you might be able to jam those deer in between all those windrows. Let's say if that food plot just had a windrowed log and stump edge all the way around, and you left an opening here and there. Well, that kind of works in Ohio, not that great in northern Ohio where there's it's flat and there's no cover. But when you get into most wooded sections of most timber, most ag mixes, especially up north, all timbered wilderness areas, deer do not want to be constricted. So make sure these piles are 30 to 50 feet off the edge. And what ends up happening is you end up with a beautiful edge of that food plot that actually has a soft edge where you have regeneration, growth, and then hardwoods or cover. And you don't have those obtrusive stumps that actually push away mature bucks. Those local doe herds and fawns, they'll get used to it, but those bucks I've seen many times over avoid those areas despite someone being paid to make it look like that, where you windrow it and leave an opening on each end, and in theory you sit in a stand right here and you watch all the deer go through from end to end. Not how it works. A lot of times the mature bucks just go right around that. They don't want to go through a cattle chute, just like hogs, cattle. They don't want to go through that small chute up into the back of a truck. They have to be prodded to do so. So think about that when you're clearing that and when you're utilizing a clear cut.
So this one is from your YouTube channel. Not so much a question, more of a statement. From David, my buddy's place is riddled with deer and they stare at ATVs 30 yards away.
Well, two things. Riddled with deer, that's a bunch of does and fawns and young bucks. They do get used to ATVs somewhat. Well, when it's the heart of the season and the ATV is starting, it's October 28th, and those deer know that ATV is coming to the land. it's going to spook deer off a 40-acre parcel, and those mature bucks will just not stay around. I ask the question all the time. Deer watch you drive by on your ATV at 30 yards. How many times have you seen the oldest buck in the neighborhood do the same thing? And if you saw it one time in your life, how many times have you seen it repeat? And the answer would be likely 99.9% of you out there is 0. Driving an ATV is not typically a good time or a good way to access a stand location ever. And I kind of laugh. I want those. I want my neighbor's property to be riddled with does and fawns because they have great habitat. They attract a lot of deer, and then they repel them with sloppy hunting habits like using an ATV to go to a stand. So guess where the mature bucks are going to be? They're going to be on my land. They're going to be on your land, my client land, my readers, viewers that practice high quality hunting efforts and practices, and that's what we want. So I hope you enjoyed this question and answer time. We're going to get some of you out there, viewers, readers, people on our Facebook page or YouTube, Instagram, but we'll advertise those dates and we'll get you in the video asking the question, and we look forward to those. And I think what I like about these questions and picking them out is we're always trying to create videos that are pertinent to the timing that is going on right now in the whitetail woods, and we've hit the mark for you on these right now with these questions right now, and you'll see a lot more of these going forward. And we appreciate the people that ask those questions in the first place. Of course, we're not revealing any last names or anything like that, but we appreciate you watching and appreciate the questions, and keep them coming. Now, as we transition into habitat season, I hope you've had a chance to check out my web class, How to Design Your Whitetail Parcel. It's on my website, whitetailhabitatsolutions.com. I have a link in the description, and I hope you can find it, check it out, and enjoy it this year.